So, Larry, one of the big events of this week was Jay Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, speaking with our very own David Rubenstein in the Economic Club in Washington. And the markets came away from that saying, you know what, he didn't go as far as we thought he would. It's saying we've got to tighten more given those jobs numbers. Are we becoming complacent? Because there's talk on Wall Street now that there won't be any landing, whether it's soft or hard. Basically, we'll just keep going.
I think the Fed understands that it doesn't understand, because no one can know the future with confidence. And I think that the Fed is determined to do what's necessary. That's certainly what I hope is the case in a substantially uncertain environment. I think the consensus has become substantially too complacent about inflation for a variety of reasons. First, let's be clear. Even after the reductions we have seen, inflation today is at levels that would have been unimaginable for inflation 2 years ago. And so we haven't come all the way down or got this fully under control. And in a way, I guess one way to put it in Super Bowl week here is that it's easier to move the ball down the field at midfield than it is when you're in the red zone. And we're getting closer to the red zone with respect to inflation. And so I think the gains in terms of further reduction are going to come harder. Second, I think there are a variety of bounce back factors that we're going to have. You saw it in the market wholesale used car prices, which look like they're going to be a positive contributor to inflation. You've seen some reversal on gasoline prices. More broadly, you've seen a variety of prices that blipped way up 9 months or so ago, and now that's mean reverting. Now that's coming back to normal. Well, it's not always going to be going down, and when those become normal, that's going to be an increment to the underlying inflation figure. And so that, too, I think is a cause for concern. Third, if you look at the variables that economists tend to think that you should look at to predict what's happening with inflation, we are an economy that's got relatively loose financial conditions now, given what's happened to markets. By some measures, financial conditions are looser than they were when all this tightening started. That's probably misleading, but we probably are back to somewhere where we were late last summer in terms of the degree of tightness in financial markets. And we've got that at a time when we still have a record level of vacancies relative to unemployment. So I think with that kind of picture, the prospect that we are not on a trajectory now where inflation is going to get to the target level, and therefore this tightening cycle is not just about 1 more, 2 more, 3 more 25 basis point increases, but something more fundamental. That's a substantial probability in this environment. So I don't think it's a moment for any kind of euphoria. And I think there is some complacency that's setting in many places.
Larry, we heard from Chair Powell on Tuesday, and a few hours later, we heard from the President of the United States, Joe Biden, as he gave his State of the Union address to Congress. He did talk about some economic things, fair number in there, including some you and I have talked about, such as Buy America. What did you make of the economic part of President Biden's speech?
Look, I think the most important thing to say about the President's State of the Union was that it was probably the clearest, strongest exposition of his economic philosophy that he has delivered during his 2 years as president. I did worry that as I heard him talk and speak powerfully and I thought persuasively about the junk fee issues and the extra money people are paying for airline baggage or paying for overdraft fees or a variety of those other junk fees. I like that because it was recognizing that people's incomes, people's spending power is what matters, and that depends on how much they earn, and it also depends on the prices they pay. I hope the administration is being very careful about that comprehensively. My guess would be that the extra taxes people are going to pay because projects are going to cost more because of Buy America, the extra prices people pay because of tariffs that we put on in the name of create or maintain, in the name of creating American jobs. My guess is that those higher prices from things that we're doing through policy probably add more to consumer burdens than all the junk fees that the president spoke about. So I think we need to look very, very carefully at those policies.
Larry, one thing that you and I have not talked about, I don't believe, is Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu's new government over in Israel. There are a lot of political and legal issues involved, but there are also some economic issues. As you know, a number of U.S. economists, I don't think were involved, wrote a letter really expressing concern about some of the proposed changes in the judiciary, what that could mean for the Israeli economy. I was a little surprised to see your name came up, actually, in the Times of Israel as having talked to the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. What do you want to tell us about what they're doing over there?
So, David, I don't talk about my conversations with government officials, as you know, but I have been following this issue closely, and I think the temperature has to come down on both sides. I think there is a strong case for judicial reform in Israel. It's unusual by international standards for judges to be chosen by currently sitting judges. It's unusual for courts to be able to rule out legislation simply by judging that it's unreasonable without having a constitution to point to. On the other hand, it's very clear from the context of the way this is being done that it is feeling to a large number of people, and a large number of people with the capacity to move their money in and out of Israel, particularly in the entrepreneurial community, that an overly rapid, not carefully done judicial reform could raise serious and profound questions about the rule of law. And that, it seems to me, could have quite serious adverse effects on the Israeli economy.
And finally, Larry, at the end of the week, we received word that Mr. Kazuo Ueda may well be appointed the next governor of the Bank of Japan. He is an academic economist, as I understand it. He has served in the past on the Bank of Japan Policy Board. Do you have thoughts about either Mr. Ueda or where the Bank of Japan needs to go next?
You know, I think we can think of him as being Japan's Ben Bernanke. He studied at MIT at about the same time that Ben did, with the same thesis advisor that Ben Bernanke had. He specialized in similar areas of monetary economics and has a soft-spoken academic way about him, but is also capable of being decisive. And I think Japan has a very complicated issue ahead of it. I don't think it's going to be able to maintain yield control for an indefinite horizon. And he has big shoes to fill. I've known Kuroda-san for more than 30 years. He's an extraordinarily capable, analytical, but also with a real measure of cunning central banker, and he will be missed. But knowing Mr. Ueda, I've got quite a bit of confidence in his ability to chart a course forward.